Welcome back to my third video on nuclear reactions. In this video, I will be describing the phenomena of nuclear fission and also describing to you the principal construction and working of a nuclear power reactor. The process of breaking a heavy nucleus into relatively lighter fragments of comparable masses with the release of energy is called nuclear fission. Nuclear fission was discovered in 1939 when Otto Hahn and Strassmann bombarded uranium-235 nucleus with a neutron and found that it split into barium and krypton along with 3 neutrons with the liberation of energy. This energy appears in the form of high energetic photons like X-rays, gamma rays, etc., as well as the kinetic energy of the fission fragments and the energy of the emitted neutrons. The reaction can be written as shown in this slide. 92U235 when bombarded with a neutron splits to krypton 92, barium 156 plus 3 neutrons on an average. The Q value of or the energy released can be calculated from the mass difference between the masses of the reactants and products, and for the above reaction this mass difference is 0.22 AMU, which gives an energy yield of about 200 million electron volts. The fission products will depend on the energy of the captured neutron, and other possible fission reactions are uranium splitting into molybdenum 98 and xenon 136 giving and 2 neutrons, or yet another route is xenon 140 and strontium 94 along with 2 neutrons, etc. I will devote this slide to an explanation of the nuclear fission on the basis of the liquid drop nuclear model. Niels Bohr and J.A. Wheeler offered an explanation for nuclear fission on the basis of the liquid drop model. A nucleus can be considered analogous to a drop of liquid. The nuclear force is similar to the surface tension force of a liquid drop. It binds the nucleons together while the Coulomb repulsive force between protons tends to distort the shape of the nucleus. A drop of liquid, as we know, tends to have a spherical shape due to surface tension forces. If deforming forces are applied trying to break this drop, the work done in deformation or the extra energy supplied to the drop will cause the drop to oscillate. If it is supplied energy is insufficient to overcome the surface tension force, the drop will not rupture. However, if the supplied energy is large, the drop deforms, acquiring an elongated shape and eventually splits into smaller fragments, which are called droplets. According to Bohr, when a heavy nucleus is bombarded by a neutron of suitable energy, the neutron is absorbed and a compound nucleus is formed. The energy of the compound nucleus is equal to the binding energy of the captured neutron and any kinetic energy that the neutron may have had. The additional energy excites the compound nucleus. If the additional energy is not large enough, that is less than a certain threshold value, the nucleus will de-excite with the emission of gamma photons. This process is generally known as radiative capture, which we discussed in the previous video. Alternately, it may eject a few nucleons. If, however, the additional energy is large, the compound nucleus is set into oscillations, causing it to be distorted as shown in the figure. These oscillations build up and cause the nucleus to attain a dumbbell shape. Eventually, the nucleus splits into 2 smaller fragments. Each fragment is a nucleus in itself, along with the emission of a few neutrons and energy. Unlike the case of a liquid drop, we should remember the fragments in general are not exactly equal in mass. The explanation of the asymmetry in the mass of the fission product is beyond the scope of this lecture. Nuclear chain reaction. The importance of nuclear fission is due to the possibility of the reaction sustaining itself once it is initiated. We saw in the previous slide that when a heavy nucleus is fissioned with a neutron, more than one neutron is released as fission products. These neutrons can in principle cause further fission in a sample of fissionable material. Thus, there exists the possibility of the fission reaction building up, each fission causing further fissions. This is known as chain reaction, which is schematically shown in the slide. If the loss of neutrons that is those that do not cause fission for various reasons as explained in the next slide, is negligible, then the neutron number will increase in geometric progression. This will result in a large amount of energy released in a short interval of time. If the number of neutrons causing fission is controlled, then we can effectively control the reaction rate and hence the rate at which energy is released. The chain reaction, once started, will remain at a steady rate, increase or decrease, depending on the neutron reproduction factor or K factor. The K factor is defined as the ratio of the production of neutrons to the rate of loss of neutrons due to A. leakage from the system and B. non-fission absorption by nuclei. Thus, if Np is the rate of neutron production and NL and Na are the leakage and non-fission absorption rates, then we define the neutron reproduction factor K as K equal to Np divided by NL plus Na. Now, there are three possibilities. If K is equal to 1, the chain reaction will be sustained at a steady rate and is called critical chain reaction. This is the principle that is used in nuclear reactors. If, however, K is greater than 1, the chain reaction grows very rapidly and the reaction will become uncontrollable and explosive. This is the principle used in atomic bombs and is known as supercritical chain reaction. If, however, K is less than 1, the reaction will not be self-sustaining. It will die down after a few stages. This is known as subcritical. The size and mass of the fissionable material in which a critical chain reaction can be sustained is called critical size and critical mass respectively. In the next slide, we will look at the possibility of fission in natural uranium. It is important to understand the contents of this slide, that is fission in natural uranium. A self-sustained critical chain reaction is difficult to maintain in a sample of natural uranium for the following reason. Natural uranium has three isotopes of mass number 238, 235 and 233 having relative abundances 99.28%, 0.714% and 0.006% respectively. Uranium-235 and 233 undergo fission by neutrons of any energy, although the probability of fission is greater with slow or thermal neutrons. Now, slow or thermal neutrons are those neutrons whose energies are comparable to the atoms or molecules of the medium in which they are moving, and it of the order of about 0.03 electron volt. Uranium-238, on the other hand, undergoes fission only with fast neutrons whose energy is of the order of 1 million electron volt or more. In addition, U-238 will also capture neutrons in the energy range band of 5 electron volt to about 200 electron volt through a non-fission capture process. That is, U-238 will capture a neutron of this energy range, and the compound nucleus U-239 which is radioactive, it will decay. In fact, the half-life is about 24 minutes and thereby there is no fission occurring. The above mentioned processes obviously will reduce the fission rate. Now, the neutron emitted as fission products have energy that are greater than thermal neutrons but not of the order of few MeV. So, the probability of the neutrons causing fission in U-235 and U-238 is pretty low. Further, they undergo inelastic collisions and are slowed down and also lost due to non-fission capture. Thus, the chain reaction cannot be sustained in natural uranium. However, if we increase the proportion of U-235 in the sample and at the same time reduce the energy of the neutrons that are emitted as fission products to thermal energies, then fission can be sustained in natural uranium. This is achieved by a process known as enrichment, that is, increasing the proportion of U-235, as well as moderation, that is, slowing down the neutrons to thermal energies. In this slide, we will look at what is a nuclear reactor, their different types and classification. A nuclear reactor is a setup in which nuclear reaction proceeds under controlled conditions. They can be classified in different ways. One type of classification is based on the manner in which fuel and moderator are mixed. The terms fuel and moderator will be explained in the following slides. In homogeneous reactor, both fuel and moderator are mixed in the form of a solution, while in heterogeneous reactor, they are separate. Reactors are also classified according to the purpose of their use. Number 1, research reactors. These reactors are mainly used to supply neutrons as well as radiation such as X-rays, gamma rays, etc. for basic research, and they also are used to produce radioisotopes for various applications. The reactor Apsara, which was commissioned in 1956, constructed by BARC located in Trombay, a suburb of Mumbai, is India's first nuclear reactor. It is used mainly for research. The second kind of reactor is known as breeder reactor. Now, we know that uranium-235 is not available in abundant quantities. So, it is desirable to develop reactors which will consume some other fissionable material other than U-235. A natural choice is plutonium-239, which is a highly fissionable material having a better fission efficiency than even U-235. Now, if you consider uranium-238, which is a natural uranium, you can convert uranium-238 to uranium-239 by bombarding it with a neutron. Now, uranium-239 is highly radioactive. It spontaneously disintegrates and undergoes 2 successive beta decays to transmute to plutonium-239 as shown in this slide. Now, the number of neutrons that are released in the fission of plutonium-239 is sufficiently large. So, if in a properly designed reactor, more than one neutron released per fission can be diverted from the fission chain, that is the fission of plutonium-239, to the transmutation of U-238 to plutonium-239 as explained on the slide. This means the reactor produces more plutonium-239 starting from U-238 obviously than it consumes U-238. This kind of reactor is called breeder reactor. In the long-term nuclear power plants envisaged in our country, plutonium-based reactors are being planned. The required plutonium is to be generated by transmutation of natural uranium and mainly also another route using thorium, which is available in plenty in our country. We will now look at what are called as power reactors. The primary purpose of these power reactors, as the name suggests, is to convert the energy released during fission into useful electrical power or electrical output. Generally, the heat energy produced during fission is used to produce steam and drive a turbine which will produce electricity. In India, the first full-fledged power reactor was built at Tarapur in 1969. Since then, many more reactors have been added, such as in Kalpakam in Tamil Nadu, Kota in Rajasthan, Kaiga in Karnataka, etc. It has been planned that almost 20% of the total power requirement of the country will be by nuclear power reactors by 2015 or so. We will outline below the main parts of a nuclear power reactor using uranium as a fuel. I will first look at the term fuel. The fuel used in a reactor is a fissionable material. Natural uranium, enriched uranium, plutonium-239 are some of the fuels commonly used. The fuel is generally in the form of rods. Then there are what are known as neutron sources. Most of the fission that we are going to talk of is induced through neutrons. So a neutron source is a suitable source that is placed inside a reactor core in the neighborhood of the nuclear fuel. This produces or gives the initial number of neutrons to start the reaction. Beryllium sand generally serves as a good source of neutron. Then we have moderator. These are materials which are used to slow down neutrons to thermal energies so that they are effective in causing fission in uranium-235, which is present within natural uranium. Moderators are used in natural uranium-based reactors generally. Moderators slow down neutrons by inelastic collisions, but please note they do not absorb them. The commonly used moderators are pure graphite, that is carbon, heavy water or D2O, ordinary water H2O, and even hydrocarbon plastics. The moderator and fuel assembly together is generally known as the core of the reactor. Then we have coolant. Large amount of heat that is generated by fission at the core must be removed from it and transferred outside so that it can be used for energy conversion. Material commonly used for this are called as coolants. Some of the coolants include ordinary water, air, carbon dioxide, helium, molten metals such as sodium, etc. The coolants generally have to be inert. Then we have control rods. The rate of fission reaction is controlled essentially by controlling the neutron number which causes fission. Materials which have a high neutron absorbing capability are used as control rods to control the rate of reaction. These materials should not themselves become radioactive when they absorb neutrons. They should also have a high melting point. Materials that are used as control rods are boron, cadmium, the alloy of silver with 15% indium and 5% cadmium, beryllium, etc. These control rods are inserted in the form of rods between the fuel elements in the core of the reactor. The rods can be moved in and out to control the reaction rate. In fast reactors using fast neutrons, control is achieved by adjusting neutron escape rate by moving the reflectors. Generally, fast neutrons are not absorbed by these control elements. We will see in the next slide couple of other parts of the nuclear reactor. In this slide, we have shown a schematic representation of a nuclear power reactor. I urge all my viewers to pause the slide here and look at the various parts of the nuclear reactor carefully and also learn how to draw this schematic diagram. What is not indicated in this diagram is the turbine which converts the steam coming out of a reactor to electricity. The turbine is a separate unit which is housed outside the reactor main building where the reactor is housed. Now there are a couple of other parts which I would like to explain. One is the reflector. In order to minimize the loss of neutrons that escape from the core is surrounded by materials such as carbon which reflect the neutrons back to the core. Then you have the heat exchanger unit. This is a very important unit in the reactor. It is in this unit where the hot gas from the core exchanges its heat energy with water and hence converts water to steam, and thereby it itself cools down. The cool gas or coolant is then recycled back into the core. Then there is the reactor shield. The reactor has to be shielded in order to protect any possible radiation leakage. The shield generally consists of 2 to 3 meter thick layers of concrete, lead, etc. These shields absorb both neutrons and high energy radiation such as gamma rays, X-rays, etc. The shield is often known as a biological shield because its primary function is to protect the health of the people. There are very stringent safety precautions laid down by the International Atomic Energy Agency, that is IAEA, which have to be complied with before you build and operate a nuclear reactor. One of the main challenges in nuclear power reactors is nuclear waste disposal. The generation of useful nuclear power from a reactor is part of a complex system that involves production of fuel from the ore, fabrication of fuel element, reprocessing spent fuel, and recovering any fissile material, and finally disposal of the residual radioactive waste. This entire cycle is referred to as a fuel cycle. Several kinds of radioactive waste are produced at various stages of the fuel cycle. These wastes are in solid, liquid and gaseous forms and have to be suitably disposed so that they do not cause any hazard to human, animal or plant life. In the next slide, we will see some of the methods used for this nuclear waste. Solids of low activity are usually packed in metal containers and buried deep into the earth. Liquids of low activity are treated to remove the activity as a solid precipitate and then disposed of in deep pits or wells specially dug for this purpose. Liquids can also be kept in strong storage tanks which are buried deep into the earth. The tanks themselves are layered with lead and other highly dense materials which stop radioactive radiation. This is a very safe, practical, and inexpensive method. Alternately, liquids can also be treated to trap the radioactive material in solidified form by techniques such as calcination, fixation, etc. Gases can also be similarly treated and may be discharged carefully into the atmosphere. With that, we come to the end of this video number 3 on nuclear reactions. In this video, we described nuclear fission, its characteristic features, and also described in a certain amount of detail the construction and working of a nuclear power reactor. We also looked at nuclear waste disposal. I would like to acknowledge the authors of several textbooks which I have consulted in preparing this video. I would also like to acknowledge Google Images, particularly the images I have taken from Shutterstock. I thank all my viewers for having seen this video and benefited from it. I would be concluding this series of nuclear reaction with yet another video, the last in the series, on nuclear fusion, and see how nuclear fusion differs from nuclear fission in terms of energy production in nuclear reactions. Thank you once again.